10.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your host, Eric Tait, and with me is our co-host,
Bob Anthony. Good to see you, Eric.
Hey Bob. Hey, another production of EVT Educational Productions with the good graces of Manhattan Neighborhood Network. And where are we for this particular edition? This is a Wednesday taping. It'll air Monday. So I guess what will still be in the news will be the brouhaha and the social media reaction to the Florida verdict.
Correct. We'll be airing shortly after the Olympics wrap up, so that will be sort of fading from the media Twitter sphere and whatnot, and we'll be getting back to.
Yeah, I there will still be a big
Sure.
Olympics, but
Absolutely.
but in the larger scheme of things, I think the Jordan Davis
Right.
trial and verdict will probably still be being talked about. I hate to lead with that just because it means I've got to go back into a whole historical perspective.
Perspective is good, though, in a case like this where it's easy to make simple judgments,
Well, just a reminder.
knee-jerk judgments
Yeah.
based on the verdict.
Yeah, the charges were murder, attempted murder, and various and sundry things like possessing weapons and firing weapons into automobiles and stuff. The young man, Jordan Davis, lost his life, but the jury was undecided and hung on whether or not they could come in with a first-degree murder on that. And so I guess they went down the Solomon splitting the baby in the middle kind of thinking and decided they could convict the individual for the attempted murder charges for having fired into the vehicle while the vehicle was actually departing the
Leaving
scene.
the scene. Right.
So
The equivalent of shooting in the back.
equivalent. So they got him for attempted murder. And as a journalist, having covered a lot of crazy stories and listened to, having seen a lot of stories where juries are told what the statute is and how they have to think, etc. It always turns out that when it gets to Florida and they get to a stand your ground defense, everything seems to get murky.
I have to agree with that. I've covered a number of murder trials in my day as a newspaper reporter, and usually after the judge gives the jury its instructions as to what charges it can possibly come back with, you have sort of a feeling as to what a jury might settle on. And in this case, we walk away without a verdict at all on the murder. In other words, every other victim is taken care of in the verdict except the one person who died.
Yeah.
There's actually no resolution, no
Absolutely.
second-degree conviction,
No nothing.
no manslaughter. It's the mistrial basically washes the case
Right.
out until you do it again.
And so they actually have to retry this individual on whether or not they want to go for manslaughter the second time or whether they want to go for murder in the first degree.
And it makes you wonder what the jury was thinking. Did somebody hold out for that first-degree murder charge where a second degree would have been an easier sell to the room? We don't know that yet.
Did they even weigh the first degree charge
that's a
because
very
of the
good-
defense put up its stand your ground defense?
Mhm.
When I talk about historical perspective, the bottom line is, as you've probably seen in a lot of the brouhaha and the Twitter sphere and Facebook and the whole bit, is that most people are incensed by the fact that that young man lost his life and this man was not convicted, and he was not convicted because this Florida stand your ground law basically, as a number of the commentators and the legal analysts, experts that were all over the media when the verdict came in were saying it's basically a license for people to just shoot to kill any person that they don't like, period.
In this case, I think it should have turned out, this incident should have been, at worst, a fight in a parking lot, fist fight in a parking lot. Never should have escalated to this level. But with that law in place, it sort of gives you the edge, whereas if you are armed, you feel you can use it.
Not if you are. All these folks are walking around with guns.
That's, well, I understand that. I understand that. Us being New Yorkers, not used to a state that allows...
These folks are all walking around with guns. This stand your ground law. I see. If I deal with the English language, because I used to be, it was an English grammar major, English lit major, but I knew my grammar quite well. Stand your ground means you stand your ground in place wherever you are. You approach another automobile and start something with someone else, I don't see how that's standing your ground.
I don't see how that applies either.
That means you are initiating some kind of contact. You are not protecting, defending anything. So you can spin your story. You can say, oh, I saw a gun. Oh, I thought I saw a gun, all of which came up in the quote defense. And no gun was ever found. No gun was produced. The testimony of the individuals in the car was that there was never a gun present. There was no gun ditched or anything. So I was in fear of my life, and yeah, I can psychologically understand that a white Florida male who sees 4 black teenagers, whether they're male, female, or whatever, is automatically going to be in fear of his life.
Now, we had a little bit of insight into his mindset in what he told the police right after the arrest. Some tapes were released today as we tape on Wednesday before the broadcast.
Sure.
And he describes himself as the effing victim. The victor, he even used that word, I was the victor, but I was the effing victim here. He saw himself as somehow being the threatened one, being the victim who had to settle down and defend himself. That was the mindset that we're dealing with.
Yeah, he's defending himself by pulling out a gun and shooting unarmed teenagers because they are black teenagers. And when I say you need a historical perspective, see, this basically is a direct result and a residue and legacy of slavery and slave codes and slave mentality. Because even within states like New York, Virginia, you name it, all 13 colonies actually had slavery. New York, like any other colony, had their own black codes. They had laws that were passed basically for social control, where they stated that no more than 3 enslaved persons could congregate at any one time.
Right.
And that was because if you had more than 3, they were in fear of their lives. They were in fear of insurrection. They were in fear of somebody rising up to take their freedom by force if necessary. Now, if you take that mindset and you bring it down 400 years, and you talk about any number of slave revolts that they don't put in the history books, folks, so you don't understand the paranoia that's infused and infested primarily south of the Mason-Dixon line. You get the Stoner Revolt in South Carolina, you have another revolt in Louisiana, you have Gabriel Prosser's revolt and Nat Turner's revolt. You have people who are always fearful of black people taking retribution and redress for all of the ills that have been placed upon them during slavery and post-slavery conditions. So when these legislatures, they don't no longer have an active KKK, so they get to legalizing the way to police and socially control this black population. And so you see these stand your ground laws proliferating. It's not just in Florida, it's now in 32, maybe 33 states. And that's not by accident, it's because there was a movie called Falling Down.
I remember it well.
Michael Douglas. And it was just a riveting indictment of what happens when white males begin to lose control of their environment, politically, socially, economically. They have nowhere to turn, and so they turn to force. And their force is usually a gun. And we're seeing that played out. And now they're passing laws to actually legitimize that violence being played out against us. That's my editorial for this particular session. It's time to move on to another element, but go ahead,
but just
wrap it up.
Well, just to take that historical link into the present, I mean, you and I have worked for corporations where we were one of the few minorities in the room. Myself at various companies.
That's a fact.
I won't even name the one that I'm referring to now.
Well,
but we had just come back. The company had gone on strike, and I was part of management at the time, so I had to come in to do the work.
I mean, I wasn't. Strikers were out.
I wasn't cross. I wasn't
a scab.
Wasn't a scab. I was management, so I was either there or fired.
Right.
That was the issue. But when we came back, there was a big meeting where everyone came back into a conference room, and a few of us brothers hadn't seen each other for a few months, and we shook each other's hands in the corner, and we were just saying hello. And then a manager pulled aside one of the people, not myself, and he asked, "What's going on
What was
over
that
there?
all about?
What's the issue here? Is there a problem?" And there was no problem. I mean, we were just congregating, but there was a corporate fear that there was something broiling in that corner of the room.
Congregating,
Right.
that's the key word.
And so that's just to bring what you were saying up to the present. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who have the same issue, but you don't need to be a minority. You could be the only woman, could be the only person who's gay.
It is what it is.
Right.
And it's all about social control.
It goes across cultures, but it's true.
It's all about maintaining control and having the upper hand and figuring out any way you can to win, to come out ahead. And if it means taking a young man's life and getting away with it, so be it. And that's basically what's playing out until we can elect people in these state legislatures. And that's the key word, because if you don't elect the people, they'll keep passing these laws. So, all right, that will probably be maybe the punctuation on that story, but I doubt it. There'll be more coming on that.
I think so.
So, the other things that are percolating in the news, you want to start on the foreign side, because there are a whole lot of big stories. Well, there's the usual Syrian civil war that's causing John Kerry and Barack Obama all kinds of problems.
Right.
There's always that Iran nuclear negotiations that's tied to that Syrian civil war. And of course there's a brouhaha going on in Ukraine.
Right.
And all three of those stories are actually tied to how does the United States deal with that Middle East crisis and its relationship with Russia. Because the other big player in those three crises is Putin and Russia.
Exactly. No, that's the point I was going to make. We have a consistent, I don't want to say adversary, we try not to look at
no more Cold War.
Right. We're not looking at it in those terms anymore. But no, they're really over the barrel in some of these cases, because we can't, there's no question that we're not going to send, we're not going to send anyone in to, no troops on the ground.
Syria,
nothing like that will happen.
No. You can talk about humanitarian problems, you can talk about people dying, you can talk about anything you want.
Right.
But if Barack Obama even thought once about putting troops into Syria, they'd try to impeach him.
Right.
Forget the humanitarian problems, forget the morality of all those folks dying. It's not going to happen. But even before we get into that Middle East thing, let quick look at in our own backyard, Venezuela. Venezuela is basically, they've got riots in the streets just like the Ukraine right now. The opposition leader, of course, there are like three opposition leaders, but
it's murky in that way.
But I think the youngest of the three opposition leaders, a guy by the name of Lopez, if I remember correctly, he basically has been charged with fomenting revolt and uprisings and stuff, and so they've arrested him, and he willingly turned himself in just because he wants his people to stay out in the streets, and he wants the government to do some kind of trial on the issue, and so he turned himself in. He's only about 42 years old, and President Maduro, Chavez's successor, of course, is using the usual party line, blaming the student unrest on the United States.
That's an old story.
Well, he might have some way back grounds way back in 2002 when some U.S. people were doing some seriously nefarious things when Chavez was in power and got caught red-handed.
Right.
But I think this one might be a stretch. I believe this is really the Venezuelan students and the Venezuelan opposition without any outside help
It makes for good public relations, though, if you throw in the U.S. When they're arguing that case.
Yeah, I think it was on the 15th, he just said, 3 of you U.S. people, y'all have to go home because y'all are causing us trouble. Now, that's usually the case when a dictator decides he needs a scapegoat to take the pressure off himself.
Sure.
And Uncle Sam is always the biggest scapegoat.
Sure. Sometimes we deserve to
Unfortunately, we put ourselves in a position where people can actually do that and get away with it. but there are some serious questions now about whether Maduro, he's only been in office for less than a year. April 2013 was when he succeeded Chavez.
Okay.
And what the kind of popular support that Chavez was able to generate, Maduro can't come close. So whatever mismanagement of their economy, whatever can go wrong that's gone wrong, it's basically snowballed into a serious crisis in Venezuela.
If he did nothing else, Chavez was a single figure that people could easily rally around. Even the people on the fringes knew that they can stand behind him on certain issues.
The guy had a way of moving people to his side.
He did.
He was able to walk whatever tightrope. Maduro doesn't stand a ghost of a chance of being able to do that.
How long was the Chavez administration? That went on for...
I forget, he got elected late 80s, I believe.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
that's what
he lasted quite a bit till cancer took him out.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's what Maduro is up against. He's up against a legend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really. Whether he liked him or not, that's what he has to build up against.
But we will stay tuned to the developments in Venezuela for you folk, and whether the rest of the media brings it to your attention or not, we will keep you posted.
Right, and how the administration responds, we'll keep on top of that there again, even if the CNNs of the world aren't covering it.
Yeah, I do believe, though, we're doing a little, let's wait and see what's going on down there. So, let's jump back to that Mideast thing, because the Iranians are back to the, quote, discussion table with the other powers that be to talk about how they're going to deal with their nuclear enrichment, uranium enrichment programs. Yeah.
Sure.
And the pundits are saying it doesn't stand a snowball chance in hell, and et cetera, et cetera. The problem that's complicating the Iranians and the other people talking is that the Iranians are also backing a whole bunch of the regime, not the whole bunch, the regime in Syria. And so, so the Iranians backing the regime that the rest of the Europeans and the United States want to step down in Syria doesn't make for very good negotiations at the negotiation table for how do we dial back this nuclear capability. So that's another tightrope dance that John Kerry is going to be walking. And I wish him well. I don't see any light at any end of any tunnel.
No,
for him
I don't see
one.
any easy route. I don't see any easy answers. It is a tightrope. And so far, I give him a little credit. He's getting his feet wet. He's learning.
He's not hesitating. He's pushing for those talks, and he's sticking to his guns. So I give him points for saying, this is where we need to go, let's go. Right. But the new wrinkle, of course, in even that axis is the Ukraine situation, because they got people in Freedom Square in Kiev with fires ablaze with opposition to the government, because the government says, oh, we're going to stay aligned with the Russians. And the people said, no, you need to be aligned with the European Union.
That's exactly it.
And boy, this stuff has blown into a major nightmare.
And I didn't realize that one of the leaders was the former, he stepped down recently, the former heavyweight boxing champ, Vladimir Klitschko.
Yeah, he's now the head spokesman of, like, I don't want to say a gazillion splinter opposition groups, but there's more than one opposition group in the Ukraine, just like there's more than one opposition, quote, leader in Venezuela, but the highest profile figure
That's
is
what
that
I mean.
heavyweight
He's
champ.
an easily recognizable
Yes.
figure that even the fringes here, again, can rally around
Yes.
and at least get noticed.
And they have.
Yes.
And they have. And so what's been happening in Kiev has now spread to the larger western part of the country. They were calling the latest revolution in the streets of Kiev an attempted coup. I think that was Vladimir Putin's phrase.
Yeah, and that's, yes.
Another propaganda. Well, you got some outside forces here, folk, that's really making things difficult because the European Union and the United States really want that country to align with Europe.
They would certainly love to have them included in that fold.
They want them
Absolutely.
on that
Yeah.
side, and Putin is saying, no, this is my front yard, not even my backyard.
Right.
This is my front yard. So he's offered them a few $1 billion to prop up their currency, to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
The government says, I'll take the $1 billion, we're going to go with the Russians. And the people say, yeah, we're taking to the streets.
Right.
So,
But long term, that's not a good plan, obviously, because
No.
you will continually have to feed them, feed that economy to keep it up.
hey, this is another one of these real tense situations that could go either way. That could turn into an outright civil war. We already got a civil war in Syria. We don't need another civil war in the Ukraine.
Right.
The planet's already falling apart. And we haven't even started to tell you about Africa and the Central Republic of the Congo. So, but that's
Okay.
for another show.
Yes. And I'm just looking at the clock. We have about 6.5 minutes left.
Okay, so 6.5 minutes. I don't want to get into immigration. Well, we could touch on it lightly. That's an in-depth story, but the latest development, national immigration headaches, folk. You know, we've got all kinds of hangups on immigration. The President of the State of the Union said there's one thing we think we should at least be able to come together to do this year that's helpful to our country is fix our immigration policy. And the initial response was, maybe we might be able to come together on that until a week later.
Yes, those warm feelings lasted about 7 days.
Right.
I think you're about right.
And so now, the bottom line is John Boehner says he's not bringing any immigration bill to the House of Representatives for even discussion.
Right.
So if he doesn't bring it up, then there's no hope of any immigration being passed in 2014. Tell me about this thing that you may have heard, though. The Democrats think they may have a backdoor way. You know that, you remember that Legally Blonde trick that was used in the movie Legally Blonde, where you get a discharge petition, where you get enough signatures, you can move any bill despite what the speaker says.
You mean
Nancy Pelosi was talking about that.
Okay, that type of move.
Yeah. Now, a discharge petition means you got to get something like 218 signatures, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I didn't do my homework before deciding to jump into that, but I believe it is 218 signatures. And if you can get that, you can bring any bill to the floor for consideration. And Nancy Pelosi said they might try that. Most of the experts think, doesn't stand a ghost of a chance in hell, but she might try it.
I've seen a lot of maneuverings in Congress of late. I'm not going to get into what Ted Cruz tried last week to irritate the Republicans.
Yeah, he just put his Republican guys in a deep hole needlessly, but that's okay.
Right.
That's Ted Cruz.
That was an utter waste of time,
but
and even Boehner said so.
Now, you and I have had this discussion on Ted Cruz, and my take on Ted Cruz is a modern-day Joe McCarthy. That's from me. Younger people don't know who Joe McCarthy is. Biggest demagogue to ever hit the United States Senate. So, for me, Ted Cruz is a modern-day Joe McCarthy. That's an assessment from journalistic experience, historical experience, and opinion.
Okay, but having done some of my schooling in the state of Wisconsin, where Senator McCarthy served as the junior senator, I know exactly what you're talking about. But you're right, we don't have a lot of time to get into it, but that's a good representation of my opinion there as well.
So, in the little time we have left, we can segue back to our local ongoing story that we know is not going away. Governor Christie and the BridgeGate.
And BridgeGate, yes.
BridgeGate. The latest development, I don't know if you saw this, Bob, because I know you were busy doing a lot of other journalistic
Local
work
reporting,
today. Yes,
sure.
but there was a report out today that said, it may have been yesterday, but, and this is today, Wednesday, next Monday it'll be last week, that said there is now a serious bit of investigation being done of the Port Authority Police. And the Port Authority Police has now gotten drawn into this brouhaha about who knew about these lanes being shut down over this, quote, bogus traffic study that wasn't a traffic study. And why did somebody at the Port Authority Police know about it? And why was a member of the Port Authority Police driving around one of Christie's lieutenants, the one lieutenant who was key to initiating the shutdown of the lanes during the time that the lanes were shut down? It also turns out that the union for the Port Authority Police has been seriously trying to poo-poo the investigation of the traffic study and the BridgeGate. So this thing has taken on another whole new twist and another whole new turn.
A lot of people are being dragged into this.
Oh, this is this reminds me of that abscam thing that they made the movie American. Was that the Oscar-nominated film? One with Bradley Cooper.
I know. I'm blanking on the name just as you are.
American Hustle.
Yes.
American Hustle. Yes. And it reminds me of the way Watergate started.
Okay.
This little thing that just kept spreading,
little trickle things
spreading,
that get
and
knitted
spreading.
together.
Abscam was like that. Watergate was like that. And as journalists, we've heard this more than once. It's not the crime that gets you. It's the cover-up.
And we're uncovering little things like, I don't know, there was a report of helicopter records that Christie might have been flown over the location.
Right. I think they turned out to be, they produced them and the helicopter did not fly over.
It did not. Okay.
Did not fly
so
over.
I'll take that one back.
But the interesting thing is things keep popping up because it's becoming not just the traffic study, it's now becoming the disbursement of the Sandy money. It's becoming how was Sandy money that was dispersed used, and was it used properly? So, we can say in good conscience, this is another story, folk, that Media Watch will have to continue to watch and keep you posted on. So
we have about 30 seconds left.
All right. Any?
No, well, I guess maybe next week we can get on to the issue of the sale of the local radio stations, LIB and BLS, the former
the MS Communications
purchase.
Proffered offer to purchase WLIB and WBLS. So that's going to impact on public affairs programming in our market. So we will be getting
We will
into
have
that.
something to say about that.
Definitely. So this has been Media Watch. I'm Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony, your co-host.
And we'll catch you the next time.